Well, the one speech I watched live, I couldn't watch Obama live. I get acid reflux. I watched Marco Rubio's speech, and it was the best response to a State of the Union I've ever seen. I don't want to hear a damn thing about water. I'm not talking about water. I'm talking about substance. Senator Rubio, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Good. I don't bring it up. I don't want to, I know everyone asks you. I'm not asking about that. I'm going to tell you something. Your speech substantively and your delivery was terrific. I'm going to tell you something. I've watched these speeches a long time. I'm not as young as I look, I watched these speeches a long time, and what I liked about your speech is you laid out a conservative agenda with our principles, and you applied them to what's going on today, and at the same time, you also explained and exposed Obama's positions and what he's done to the country. Is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah, absolutely. The way I envisioned it this way, I went into the speech saying, how would I explain, I know people, unfortunately, that voted for Barack Obama. I know people that voted for him, and I tried to change their minds. It was too late. But I envisioned speaking to them and saying, let me explain to you why what he's for is bad for you and why what we're for is good for you. And it starts by acknowledging how special this country is, which everybody would admit, and then you go on to explain why is it special. It's special because anyone from anywhere can accomplish anything, and that's the result of free enterprise. Everything else has been tried. This promise that big government, through more spending and more programs, is going to allow you to have a better life in the middle class, that's been tried all over the world, and it's failed every single time. You acknowledge, of course, government has a role to play, but it's wisely limited by our Constitution, and when it goes beyond that role, it can't do what it's supposed to be doing well, the essential things that it's supposed to be doing well. You acknowledge that not every problem we have has a government solution. I mean, some of our problems are directly the result of a moral breakdown in our country, and the answer to that is in our families and in our faith, not in our politicians. So I wanted to explain to people also why the policies the president is for aren't really good for them. Obamacare. I mean, there are people that are going to get laid off because of Obamacare. There are people that are going to lose the health insurance that they have and they're happy with because of Obamacare. And the last thing I thought was important is to expose the false choices that he's constantly giving us. The only way to balance our budget is you either have to raise taxes or cut the safety net for people who are truly in need. How about growing our economy so we have new taxpayers, not new taxes? That would be helpful. And of course, the one thing that I pointed out last night, which really bothers me, is he and his allies are always saying that, George Bush. And the truth is that Barack Obama in 4 years generated more debt, $1 trillion more debt, than George W. Bush did over 8.
Yeah, and based on his State of the Union speech, hopes to produce more debt. What really troubles me about this, and you touched on it in your speech too, is look at the trajectory, $26 trillion in debt over the next 10 years. I mean, how are we going to shovel out of this? How are we going to get out of this? He has no answers whatsoever.
Well, that's the only thing he said last night, Mark. He said last night that none of these things that he's proposing will add to the deficit, which I don't think that's true. But let's say it was for a second. Here's what he's not telling you. We already have an existing deficit of about $800 billion to $1 trillion a year. And so we already have an existing deficit. We have to deal with the existing. It's not just about not adding more to that deficit. It's about not allowing it to continue. Because every year that deficit goes on is more that we're adding on top of the $16 trillion. And that's why it's a play on words that he came up with last night, which is really disingenuous.
Yeah, look, I'm going to ask you something. I know you'll give me a. Well, anyway, let me ask it this way: aren't you tired of stupid interviewers? I mean, I watch them. I'm saying to myself, you have this fella here. He's given a really fantastic speech. You don't have to answer this. You may be the Republican nominee. You may want to run for president one day. You're definitely one of the great, outstanding senators that we have. And you ask him stupid questions. You must roll your eyes when you're on the phone to your staffers or something there. Am I right?
you know what's happened? I've just kind of, you ever watch sports where some team that's from a warm weather place has to go play in a cold weather city?
Oh,
that's
sure.
just what it is. I mean, you got to play the game. It's snowing. You don't like it. I'm a fan of the Dolphins. Unfortunately, they haven't done well lately, but they have to play all the time in these cold weather sites. They're not a cold weather team. It's the same thing. If you want to be in this process, unfortunately, one of the things we have to put up with is sometimes some people in the media do have a bias, and oftentimes they just focus up because they're driven by ratings, and so they gotta. What is it that sells? It's scandal, it's sensationalism. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes you just got to put up with it. You work through it, and you try to make your point. Because here's what I trust. I trust the wisdom of real people. I'm telling you, real people that every single day have to get up and take their kids to school, and they got to work 10 hours and then come back home and make dinner for the kids and do homework and put them in bed, and they're exhausted. They got to get up tomorrow and do it all over again. Those folks, they get it. They understand what matters and what doesn't matter, and they're not going to fall for whatever somebody in the television is telling them. So that's who I put my faith in. And, part of that is you got to inform people by going on these shows, and because that's what they're watching. But you got to put up with some of that. But it's all right. It's all, there are worse lives.
Let me ask you this question. Why do you think the Republicans didn't connect with these people you're talking about the last election cycle?
Well, I think it's just a trend over time. I mean, I think we have to recognize that our conservative principles have to be applied to the challenges of the 21st century, not just the challenges of the 20th. And the 21st century is different. I mean, the challenges we face are different. I outlined some of that tonight. Unfortunately, we've got some real problems in our society that need to be dealt with, and some of those don't have government answers. But, for example, our students, our higher education students aren't just 18-year-old high school graduates anymore. It's a returning veteran. It's a 36-year-old single mom who, regrets not going to school when she was younger but now wants to go back to school. Conservatism has answers for them. And primarily the best answer we have is a vibrant private economy where they're going to be able to find a job, not one that pays them $9 an hour, which is what the president's talking about, one that pays them $29 an hour, $39 an hour. And there are things conservatism can do to make that possible. It isn't about, it's easier to say we're going to give you a government program or we're going to pass a new law that forces people to pay you more. But that stuff, it may sound good at the beginning, but it's never worked. What works is a vibrant private economy where people have the confidence to risk the money they've made instead of leaving it in the bank. They start a business. The business grows. They hire more people who in turn spend the money they make into the economy creating jobs for others. That's what works. It takes a little longer to explain, but when you do, it connects with people. We have to do more of that.
Well, I want to congratulate you because I went right on my social sites. I watch it, and I was spellbound listening to you saying, finally, somebody's laying out our positions in an effective way and exposing Obama's positions, because certainly Obama's not going to expose his own record. Now, while I have you, on the floor of the Senate, this Hagel nomination, what's going on right now? Do you know?
Well, look, what's going on is the following. I mean, Harry Reid is going to try to invoke cloture, which basically means cuts off debate, and then we got to vote on him quickly after we come back, and that's what he's going to try to do on Friday. The problem is this, that, look, let me say this in fairness, okay? The man is a decorated war hero, and we admire and respect his service to our country, and it's not personal. But there are some very legitimate questions and information that he's been asked for, which they have not produced. And I think, before you nominate and confirm someone to Secretary of Defense, which is not just a cabinet post, but a very important cabinet post, we should deserve to have answers to some of these questions. These are not unreasonable requests, and their unwillingness to provide it, I think, is troubling. And I don't question his veracity. I don't question his honesty. I don't do any of that. I'm just saying produce the information. And I'm still not going to vote for Chuck Hagel. I don't think he's the right man for the job. But I think he's going to get his vote if he produces this information. He's got to produce this information that he's being asked for. It's a legitimate question that's asked of any nominee. It was asked of President Bush's nominees. So I hope he'll do that and avoid all this, because it's not good for him to go in or try to go in under this cloud of uncertainty that right now is hanging over his head.
What about Brennan for the CIA? Rand Paul has given an indication he wants to slow that one down.
Yeah, and I guess Senator Paul's got some legitimate concerns that he's raised, and we have as well. We had a hearing last week. I haven't made a decision on Brennan yet. I need to learn some more, but I asked him some questions last week. We had this guy that is probably, there's evidence that suggests he might have been linked to the Benghazi attack. He was in the custody of the Tunisians, and the Tunisians let him go. And we didn't even go over there and talk to him. We didn't even ask them to send him to us. they just let him go. And I asked him about that, and I didn't like his answer on it. And, here's the other problem. We don't have a program to be able to detain terrorists right now. I mean, he talks about all these different things about the court system being able to handle them. The war on terrorism is not just to prosecute a criminal for deterrence. I mean, what you want from a terrorist is the first thing you want is information from them.
Exactly.
So you can prevent other attacks. And the second thing you want is to take them off the battlefield so they can't continue to fight you. It's not about Mirandizing them and putting them in trial and giving them their rights and all these sorts of things. And he doesn't believe in that. And so I'm troubled by that, because I think that the CIA should be in the business of interrogating people and of getting information from them so that we can prevent other attacks. It's a lot better than what's happening now, because it's interesting. If we would have gotten a hold of this guy that's probably or could be linked to Benghazi, we have no place to take him, because the CIA and the guy who wants to be the next director doesn't believe the CIA should be in the detention business.
Yeah, and this interrogation issue, I mean, you're right. I mean, when did we become members of Eric Holder's law firm and start defending all these guys? I mean, the fact of the matter is an act of war and an unlawful enemy combatant is one thing, and a garden variety domestically grown criminal is quite a different thing, and it's always been a different thing.
Well, listen, as you well know from your legal background, you arrest a criminal primarily for deterrence. I mean, obviously you want to lock them up, but you also want to deter other people from committing these crimes. A terrorist doesn't care if they get caught. I mean, they're willing to die. They think it's a badge of honor to die. I think they're going to go to heaven, the paradise, if they die. And so when you get your hands on a terrorist, what you want from them is not to make an example of them, because these other folks that are lined up behind them don't care. What you want to know is who these other folks are and what they're planning and where you can go get them. You want information from them, and you can't do that if you're not detaining and interrogating.
Mm-hmm. Do you, when you talk about, do you talk? I don't know, how can I put this? Do you spend a lot of time talking to like-minded conservatives in the Senate, like Mike Lee and maybe and Cruz and guys like that?
Yeah, we have something called the steering committee, which is kind of the conservative conference within the Republican conference. We have an executive committee of that steering committee that meets once a week, and the chairman used to be Jim DeMint, who's now retired, and so the new chairman is Pat Toomey, who's a fantastic senator, and Ted is a member of that, and Mike Lee, Rand Paul, myself, Kelly Ayotte, John Cornyn. I mean, there's the Jeff Sessions, David Vitter. We have Ron Johnson. We have a real good group in there. We get together once a week on Wednesday afternoons, and then we have our steering committee lunch on Thursday with the entire conference of members. So we talk a lot, we coordinate a lot, we try to work together on these issues as much as possible, and we usually vote together on these issues as well.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this question, and I only have 90 seconds left.
Yeah.
People speculate about whether you're running for president or not. I'm guessing that's just something you're thinking about, but you're not sure, correct?
Mark, that's not the way I approach this. I have a job now, and if I do a good job at this job, I'll have options, and those options include running for re-election, leaving politics and doing something else and giving someone else a shot. I mean, that's a legitimate option. Or, running for some other position. But that's not a decision I can or need to make today. What I need to do now is do the best job that I can on behalf of the people of Florida and of the United States in the Senate. And that's what I intend to do. And in a couple of years, I'll have a decision to make about what I want to do in 2016 in terms of running for re-election or something else. We're not there yet. And right now what I need to do is a good job at my job. And that's what I hope I'm doing. I'm not saying I always get it right, but I sure try. And I pray every day that, God provide me the guidance, the wisdom, and the courage and the strength to be on the right side of these issues, even if it's
well, you're very refreshing to me. You're unique. People don't have to agree with everything you say or every position you take, but they know you come at it earnestly. They know you come at it from a principled position. You gave a great speech last night. I really enjoyed it. God bless you, my friend. Next time I'll talk to you.
Thank you for having me on. God bless you, too.
All right, take care.